Welcome to the tutorial for air masses of East Asia. What you're going to need for this will be 3 post-it notes. We'll be taking notes on those. And your map that you find on page 180. In your textbook on page 695, it talks about different effects on climate. One of the first things that they talk about here in the main idea is that wind patterns influence the climates in East and Southeast Asia. And those climates are shaped by 3 separate air masses. The first air mass, we're going to take our sticky note here and put a number 1 on it, like so. And this is an air mass that brings cold, dry air from the Arctic region. So number 1, we're going to put cold, dry air from Arctic. We'll take this post-it note and just kind of tuck it up over in the corner here. We're actually going to draw this air mass. The Arctic is from the north, or the North Pole area, and what it does is it comes down and it sweeps into this area. You can draw arrows just like this. And we're going to put number 1s next to these. So this becomes our key. So those cold air masses affect the climate of the region. And what happens is in the winter, the cold air sweeps across Siberia up here in Russia. It lowers the temperatures in Mongolia and the northern part of China. The average temperatures of the capital of Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia's capital, is about -15 degrees in January. So it's even colder here sometimes in Minnesota. Next, we'll take our next post-it note and we'll put a number 2. And the second one, it's cool, dry air from the west. So number 2, we'll put cool, dry from west. Now this air mass moves west, or starts in the west and moves eastward across Asia. So what happens is it comes this way and moves in that direction. And then we'll put number 2s here. We'll take our little post-it note, stick it right there. These air masses makes for a very dry continental climate. So let's emphasize the dry here. In the summer, this is caused by that dry air blowing across those deserts, the Taklamakan Desert and then the Gobi Desert right here. It makes for very dry. You have some monsoon winds that happen too that we'll talk about when we get to India. Our third air mass that affects climate in the region, we'll take this post-it note here, we'll put a number 3, and this is, it carries warm, moist air from the Pacific. Put our little post-it over here. What happens is this is the Pacific Ocean all the way out into here, and where it comes from is it moves up in through this region like so. Again, you can draw arrows in. In the summer, this warm, moist Pacific air brings rain into the southeastern Asia region. And that's what makes it a great rice growing area. In some inland parts of East Asia, the summer monsoons can bring as much as 80% or more of the region's yearly rainfall. In the winter, the dry winds blow outward from the Asian continent. So in the summertime, the winds come from this direction, dropping rain. And in the wintertime, they reversed and they come out towards the Pacific again. So down here is the equator. We have pretty warm temperatures year-round. So this is the different air masses and how they affect the climate of East and Southeast Asia. Turn your map over and we will continue working on the next map, East and Southeast Asia climate. Next, we're going to take a look at how these wind patterns affect the climate of East and Southeast Asia. You are going to need 4 post-it notes. And as we look at page 698 through 699 in our textbook, the first climate that we'll talk about deals with those winds that were coming out of the north, those cold Arctic winds. If you remember, they come through Mongolia. And this first climate that we're going to label here is called a dry continental climate. So go ahead and write this on your post-it note. Additionally, Zud and then Gobi Desert will be things to put on here. For Mongolians, they fear this Zud conditions is because dry summers decrease the available food for their herds, which may be too weak to survive those very cold winters. So a series of those Zud conditions can be very detrimental to the Mongolian herders. And in this area we also have a desert, so that makes sense. The dry winds from the north is helping to create a Gobi Desert here. It means place without water. So this dry continental climate, we're going to put number 1s throughout Mongolia, a little bit into northern reaches of China. So this dry continental climate again is affected, or it's created by those Arctic air masses that are coming from the north. The next climate that we will talk about is the wet continental climate, and that's influenced by those winds that were coming up from the Pacific Ocean, bringing warm, moist air. So we have wet continental, and there's 2 types of climates in here. There's the humid continental and the humid subtropical. So go ahead and write those down. Pause this recording if you need to until you're finished. But those are located kind of in this coastal region. Up here in the northern part of China, it's very similar to what you would find here in Minnesota, which is also a humid continental climate. Then we get down here to the humid subtropical areas, which is very much like Florida of the United States. Again, these are affected by those winds that are coming up from the Pacific. The third climate that we will talk about is the tropical climate. Now the tropical climate has some sea breezes that come in off these areas here to kind of cool the area down, but it's near the tropics, hence the name tropical. And because it's near the tropics, it's very, very warm, and it's also very hot and humid. They have a lot of rainforests there that retain that humidity. So the sea breezes help to keep this area cool. So this tropical area can be found throughout the Indochina Peninsula and over in these areas as well. And our fourth one, you can just place this over any of these here because they are removable, is the highland climate. Highland. And as the name indicates, it's a higher land. So the higher in elevation you go, the cooler it gets. This would include the Himalaya and the Plateau of Tibet. So we're going to put number 4s around here, where the Himalayas are located in that Plateau of Tibet. So the highland areas, again, there's various places in East and Southeast Asia with that, but the main ones here are the Plateau of Tibet, where temperatures tend to be cool, and they drop even more in the mountains because they receive that dry continental air. They tend to have drier landscapes out here. We have a Taklamakan Desert out here, for example. And so again, in review, those cold Arctic winds that come down affect and give this a dry continental climate, whereas the warm Pacific winds that come up in here bring moisture in the summertime, and remember they reverse in the wintertime. Here it's very tropical, it's warm year-round, but you have these sea breezes that help to keep it cool. And then the highland area over here, where the elevation affects the climate. This concludes your notes for East Asia's wind patterns and climate zones